Hi everyone, this is my fight on 9's event, the Power of Action Chaos Challenge stage. And before I go into the battle, I'll just be giving a quick overview of this fight itself and the party that I used for the Chaos Challenge. So this Chaos Challenge consists of two waves. The first wave are a repeat of an old enemy type called the Commander Beast, which is not very challenging, and by now most people will have experience with this boss already. The mechanics of the first wave is that the Commander Beast starts the fight with two minions, two worker beasts, and it always starts the fight by buffing the entire enemy party with Reinforce, which grants a generic attack, defense, and speed up to the entire army party. And it also has an attack called Assault that essentially locks the minions to the same target as itself. And I guess the annoying thing is the 8 command, which gives itself um, cover behind the minion base, similar to how Galuf works. So once it uses 8, anytime your party member attacks the boss, one of the minions will actually cover the boss and take damage in the boss's place, which can be quite annoying. Which means that if if you let the boss use 8, you need to then kill off the minions before you can start damaging the boss, unless you use AoE HP attacks. Once the minions are dead, after about 3 turns I believe, the boss will actually be able to revive the minions, and then you have to start the whole cycle again. You do need to kill off the boss as well as the minions to end the wave. Killing the boss alone is not enough. The best strat here is to try to burst down the boss quickly before it can use it. Otherwise, you then have to try to rely on AoE HP attacks. Or once the minions are dead, you really do need to try to kill off the boss before it can revive the minions again, because the minions do have a considerable HP pool. With characters such as Noctis, turn manipulation, that shouldn't be too difficult. Overall, at this stage of the game, the first wave doesn't really have that much HP in total. Which brings me to wave 2. Now wave 2 are all heavily magic resistant, but since this is a challenge quest, and all the synergy characters are not magic based anyway, that really doesn't matter. Wave 2 is also weak to wind, which is where Fujin comes very handy. She grants wind enchant to the entire party, which makes everyone hit for weakness damage. Now that the boss does have a recast ability on wave 2, which is pretty standard group magic brave and HP attack at this point of the game. If you have Basch, he can comfortably redirect the entire HP damage onto himself. Otherwise, 9 also comes with HP mitigation mechanic, which can protect you from the boss's recast ability. Most of the other attacks from the boss are pretty standard. The only other thing to watch out for are the boss's pull doll attack, which follows the same turn manipulation mechanic as Noctis. So essentially, it can move its minion's turn right after its own turn. And essentially, if you think about it, if it grants its minions brave and then moves the minion's turn, it can lead to the minion then immediately using HP attack on your characters. However, again, because there are two tanks in this synergy challenge, being Basch as well as 9, this isn't too dangerous. Basch can inflict lock on the entire enemy party, which means that any HP attack they will do will be redirected to Basch anyway, and he can comfortably tank the HP damage. And again, 9 has Brave as well as HP mitigation built into his kit, so with either of those two characters, it shouldn't be too difficult. You really only need one of the two tanks um, for you to comfortably work your way through this Chaos Challenge fight. Now coming to the party I used, I skipped 9's banner completely because I already have Basch built up from his Lost Chapter event, and of course I have Noctis built up quite some time ago already. And Fujin already 3-3'd her weapon long before this event, mainly because in the past I used her together with Keys. They both make a very good combo. All my characters have 9-9 summon boards. Basch and Noctis have 3-3 character boards, as you can see. Whereas for Fujin, I kept her at 0 character boards. I don't think she really needs her character boards at this stage of the game. And besides which, she's not one of the characters that I often use anyway. As far as summon goes, I use Leviathan summon here, but coming from the fight that I did, I realized that probably Pandemona summon would be better, because you will be doing quite a fair bit of launches in this fight with both Noctis and Fujin. And during summon phase, everyone will be hitting for weakness damage, and it will lead to massive launch damage. So personally, I think Pandemonium summon would be better for this fight. If you have Noctis burst like I do as well, together with his LD, the amount of turn manipulation you have with Noctis is so much to the point that the bosses won't really get that many turns in. And you see later in the fight that I showcased that by abusing Noctis's LD as well as his burst and the summon phase on the wave 2, you can really minimize the enemies getting many, if any, turns. So with that, let's get into the fight. Okay, so again, the first wave is the Commander Beast and a pair of Worker Beast minions. And like I mentioned at the start, the focus on the first wave is to try to focus all your HP damage as much as you can on the boss, because once the minions are dead, the boss can actually revive them after about 3 turns or so. And so there's really not much point to focus down the minions too early. The goal of the first wave is to try to either kill off the boss before you can use it, or if you are not able to, the second best approach is to kill off the boss before it can resummon its minions back from death. You can, I guess, still complete the whole challenge even if the boss resummons the minions the first time, but obviously then it will cost you a bunch of additional turns killing off the minions the second time. Just something to note about both Wave 1 and Wave 2 in this Chaos Challenge are that the minions have extremely low chase values, and it doesn't take that many AoE brave attacks to cause them to be in the launchable state, which is represented by the arrow on the enemy sprite once they are launchable. And you can take advantage of this by using launches to fill your other characters with brave, and this helps to keep your party either with lots of brave or to try to pile on damage on the minions. However, of course, your main aim is to try to focus HP damage on bosses on both waves as much as possible. So what I would recommend is if you have AoE attacks that are split damage, and this can be things like Noctis's LD, which always does 100% to the entire enemy group, or Fujin's Sai, I believe, which is a split HP damage. Fujin's S1 is split HP damage. Basch LD is also split HP damage. So since all these attacks deal equal damage across the entire enemy party anyway, if the minions are launchable, you should be focusing on them, um, so that you can still deal the same HP damage to the boss while getting a launch on the minion at the same turn. Um, you do need to watch out for Noctis's warp step as well, because when Noctis's LD warp step buff is active, and if you target the minions, it will then move your character's turn before the minion's next turn, which may or may not be ideal depending on the turn order, so you do need to keep that in consideration. So it's pretty straightforward. I used one of Noctis's LD at the start to get quick warp step buff on everyone so that they can get additional turns of damage onto the boss, as well as ramp up Noctis's Armiger stacks to 5 immediately in the first turn. Once the minions are dead, you can see here that the boss is very near death. It's about to use its AoE Brave attack on my party. So I just sort of burst it down before it gets its next turn. Okay, so starting on wave 2, because wave 2, one of the minions always starts the fight by targeting the entire enemy party, as you can see from minion C here, and that uh, is a group buff as well as a group battery attack, which can make the enemies a bit more dangerous. So my goal at the start was to try to pile on the damage as quickly as possible before the bosses gets turns. Um, and because at the start of the fight, all three of my characters lined up nicely, so I tried to maximize the launch potential at the start, as you can see here, to get some launches in before the enemies even get a turn with full 2 character follow-ups. Alright, here I wanted to use Basch LD, and because it does split damage, I wanted to aim one of the minions to at least get a launch out of it. But Fujin doesn't have a turn here, so launch wouldn't be a full launch. And for this reason, I decided to use my summon. Once I use summon, I use Basch LD, create a launch, and get 2 full character follow-ups after the launch. Now, in case you're wondering that this may be a waste of a summon, my goal really coming into the second wave is to actually use both summon and Noctis's burst to try and get as much damage in before the minions can buff and before the boss gets its first recast ability. And because I wanted to use both the summon and bursts early anyway, I thought this would be a good time as well as any. And you see here that I capitalized launch on the other minion as well. I think this helps because the minions are very prone to launches, and launches can be very useful in filling your entire party's brave, because follow-up brave attacks are usually multi-hit and tend to give you tens of thousands of brave, which acts as a pseudo brave battery. Other than that, you do really want to try to focus damage on the boss, because the boss is quite tanky. Do note though that you again, same as wave 1, you need to kill the minions as well. Killing the boss alone is not enough. And the other thing is, once the main boss in the middle is dead, the minions will use an aura called Runaway, which essentially raises all its stats generically as an aura. So this means that you want the minions to be near death when the boss dies, so that you can comfortably quickly kill off the minions before they get too dangerous. Yeah, having said that, really, if either Basch or Nine as tanks, none of the enemies are really quite dangerous in this Chaos challenge. Okay, so the enemy party is about to get their first turns. The good thing about the situation I'm in is that Noctis has his free turns active because he just used his EX. So this is really a good time to use his burst, because his shooting star is also at the plus state, which you can then abuse to cause quite a lot of launches. So I start off his burst with his shooting star plus, which is a free ability use at this point, and this causes a launch. Then if I follow up with Noctis's EX, this actually causes his next shooting star to also be a free ability use again. So you can actually fit in a shooting star and then a shooting star plus again right after his EX to cause yet another launch during his burst. And inside burst animation, you are always guaranteed full 2 character follow-up attacks, even if their turn happens to be after the enemy's turn. So it was nice to get some launches during Noctis's burst. And before he ends his burst, it's very important to keep his LD skill use inside his burst animation as the last skill, because then he will then be able to end his burst with still 1 charge left of his warp step ability. And of course, it grants the rest of your party 2 turns of warp step, which is quite handy as a free LD skill use. Okay, so burst has ended. Boss is of course still about to get its turn, uh, but I guess it doesn't matter too much, because I'm pretty much still at the start of the fight. The enemy party hasn't gotten their first turn yet, and I'm almost halfway through in terms of HP damage anyway. And usually the first 1 or 2 turns isn't too dangerous at the in chaos fights. Okay, so here's where the enemy party gets their first turn. One of the minions does a brave attack, and the boss does a brave attack as well. The minion C hasn't gotten its first turn yet, but once it does, it will buff the entire enemy party and grant brave. Looking back, I should have used Basch Fulminating Darkness S2 ability to launch minions as well, because you can see that it does split HP damage across. So since the boss will take equal damage as the minion, you might as well use it to create a launch. It will still deal the same amount of damage to the boss, and you get the free launch as well. So here I really should be using Fulminating Darkness on minion A to cause launch while dealing equal damage to the boss. I used Ruin Impediment because at that time I was thinking that it does quite a lot of damage, and it batteries the entire party as well, so that they can do considerable launch HP damage, which I guess is fine as well. It really depends on whether do you want to maintain the HP damage on the boss, or do you want to maximize the HP damage on the minions during launch. Right here, if I use Noctis's LD on minion C, I could have actually benefited by him then having Warp Step move his turn right before minion C's turn, which will grant him a turn pretty soon. I chose to target the boss because I was thinking it was going to be nice to have his follow-up attack on the boss to deal some extra damage. So it's really a trade-off here. If I targeted C, I could get his turn sooner, but I will lose some additional damage on the boss. If I target the boss, I'll get some additional HP damage in, but his turn comes a bit later. I would imagine it's going to be difficult to completely prevent C from buffing the entire enemy party anyway, so I just decided to let it go, let it buff the entire enemy party, and after that, I can just actually re-break the entire enemy party to cause them to delay their turn again anyway. Their generic buffs wouldn't really matter that much because they wouldn't get that many turns in after this. In fact, I ended the fight before the boss is able to use its recast ability. From here on in, since the boss is the next enemy that will get a turn, this is where I used up Noctis' remaining LD skill users to grant the entire party warp step. And if the entire party focuses their target on the boss, this would mean that with warp step active, their turn will always be moved right before the boss's turn, which will grant me quite a number of turns of additional damage until warp step wears off. And that's pretty much the rest of the fight. This is where I just go all out, use up all my skill uses as much as possible. And you see here, I actually use Fujin's AA as well to delay the entire enemy party again. I should have used both her AA here. It's actually the best time. I was sort of got a bit greedy and wanted to save the AA for later on, which I think is a small mistake here on my part. So here, if you use Fujin's AA to delay the entire enemy party, it gives you even more turns to pile on the damage. That, as well as Noctis' LD, is really more than enough to wear down the boss before it can use its recast ability. Now, I guess the only other thing to note is that if you don't have Noctis' burst or you don't have full 3-3 on your character, this fight, I think, is still pretty much very manageable. As long as you have either Basch or 9 built up as a tank, even the boss's recast ability isn't very threatening. Basch can comfortably tank it, and 9 can just use his LD to absorb the HP damage that the boss will do anyway. Lastly, when the boss starts to be really low, you do want to start damaging the minions as well to bring them to a lowish amount of health as well, so that once the boss is dead, it wouldn't take you that long more to kill off the rest of the minions as well. I really should have used Fujin's AA much earlier. And that's it. Hope this video has been useful. As always, if you enjoyed the video and the commentary, please leave a like or subscribe or leave a comment in the comment section as well. Thank you.